Although it's under the Natural Resource Department, but energy is concerned.
I have a cousin married to that island.
Oh, I see.
They moved last 20 years or so.
Oh, okay, so he's now Micronesian.
Yes, 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 yes.
So it's a pleasure
She's
to meet
actually,
you.
Austrian.
Okay.
Yes,
And I'll give you a contact.
yeah, cousins.
So what's the
I think she
family?
works Eddie Leon.
Eddie Leon.
James
Oh,
Eddie Leon
okay.
is
Oh, I
head
know
doctor
James.
on that
Yes,
island.
yes.
Yeah, that is
Oh,
my
so
brother-in-law.
yeah,
Yes, Martina.
the wife is also she
Yeah.
works at the hospital too.
The wife works for the state minister.
Yes, yes.
Her name's Martina. That's my
Martin,
we're
yes.
first cousins.
But she's light
Yes,
complected,
yes, yes.
curly hair.
Yes,
Yeah, I've met her.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a small world.
Our mothers
I'm going to do some of it right now. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats so that we can begin our next session on grids and storage. If you're here for our high-level dialogue on grids and storage, you're in the right place, and it would be wonderful if you could take your seats so that we can begin pretty soon. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your places. We do want to begin our session now, so please kindly find your seats. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, good afternoon. As chair of this high-level public dialogue on key enablers for the energy transition, grids and storage, Kenya is pleased to open this session and to emphasize a fundamental reality of the energy transition, that ambitions to scale renewable energy generation can only be realized if grids and storage advance at the same pace. Across emerging and island power systems, grid constraints and insufficient flexibility are already affecting reliability, affordability, and investment certainty. Storage is therefore no longer supplementary infrastructure. It is a core system asset that enables higher shares of variable generation, limits curtailment, and strengthens resilience to operational and external shocks. In Kenya, dedicated, targeted, and accelerated focus have seen electricity access rising from around 29% in 2013 to 75% currently, supported by nearly 9,500 kilometers of high-voltage transmission lines and regional interconnectors that enhance system reliability and cross-border trade. With renewables now accounting for approximately 82% of installed capacity, but dispatched electricity from renewable being about 93%, the government has committed over $311 million to new high-voltage transmission infrastructure over the next 5 years to reduce losses and strengthen grid stability. Against this backdrop, accelerated renewable deployment has sharpened the focus on integrated transmission planning, system flexibility, and regulatory frameworks that allow storage to participate effectively in system operations and markets. This session offers a timely opportunity to focus on practical reforms that can be implemented in the near term, to move from commitment to delivery and to inform agencies' work, programmatic work on these critical enablers. I now hand over to Director General, Mr. Francesco La Camera, for his opening remarks. You have the floor, Director General.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, my friends. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the annual edition of the high-level public-private dialogue. Arena Coalition for Action flagship event that will focus on grids and storage. Your participation today reflects a shared understanding that achieving the energy transition depends not only on ambition, but on our collective ability to deliver. The decade ahead will be decisive in determining whether global temperature rise can still be limited to 1.5 Celsius. Achieving this will require rapid decarbonization of the energy system, a major expansion of grid infrastructure, and widespread electrification across end-use sectors. Yet, despite growing ambition, progress remains insufficient and emissions continue to rise. The real issue is whether we can move with the speed and scale required to keep the Paris Agreement within reach, without compromising reliability, affordability, or security of supply. At COP28, countries committed to triple renewable energy capacity and doubling energy efficiency by 2030. COP29 built on this momentum through the Global Energy Storage and Grids Pledge. These commitments are more than symbolic. They acknowledge a fundamental reality. Even with faster deployment of renewables generation alone will be not sufficient. Without modern grids, adequate flexibility, and storage deployed at scale, renewable energy cannot deliver its full value to society, economies, or our shared environment. Today, generation is advancing faster than the system that must carry balance and secure it. This imbalance has become one of the most significant bottlenecks in the global energy transition. Delays in permitting, underinvestment in networks, fragmented planning, and outdated market design are slowing progress. In some regions, these challenges are already forcing renewable projects to still be curtailed or even cancelled. ARENA's analysis is therefore clear. As renewables, particularly solar and wind, scale rapidly toward 2030 and beyond, global power systems will need 2.5 to 3 times more flexibility than they required just a few years ago. This is not a marginal adjustment. It's a structural shift. Storage, grids, demand response, digitalization, and AI interconnection must be planned and deployed as one integrated system. This is why today's dialogue matters. Grids and storage are not secondary enablers. They are the backbone of a resilient, electrified energy system. The pledge to reach 1,500 gigawatts of global storage capacity, to double grid investment, and to expand or refurbish millions of kilometers of network by 2030 represents a step change in ambition. But I wish to emphasize that ambition must now translate into national targets, bankable projects, and regulatory certainty. This roundtable brings together the actors who can act on these priorities. The transition will not be delivered by declaration alone, but by coordinated action across public and private sectors. ARENA stands ready to support these efforts by gathering your feedback and providing data and analysis through our cooperation platform, including the Coalition for Action and the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, the UNESA. At the same time, the energy industry possesses a vast operational knowledge and experience on many aspects of energy transition, including the use of transformative technologies such as AI, from enhanced forecasting to predictive maintenance and grid optimization, to be shared through open innovation platform. The use of digital and AI solutions will reduce cost and improve security of electricity supply, among other benefits. In this context, ARENA welcomed the recent launch of UNESA Digital Academy that include modules on digital and AI solutions. By combining our efforts, we can avoid costly duplication across the sectors and accelerate the deployment of technological solutions that are urgently needed worldwide. This collaboration is particularly critical in areas such as grid and storage, are where ambition meets reality. Let us ensure that they become accelerators, not constraints, of the energy transition. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Director General, for those very kind words and focusing words for us, even as we engage in this session today. And I want to turn to the ARENA Deputy Director so that you can be able to take it from there. Or rather, let me now invite the moderator to take. Oh, she's already. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director General. Excellencies, leaders, esteemed representatives of industry within IRENA partnership initiatives, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. So, good evening almost. I am Norela Constantinescu, the Deputy Director of IRENA Innovation and Technology Center in Germany, Bonn. I will provide this scene-setting presentation for this high-level public-private dialogue on grids and storage, which is the flagship annual event of our Coalition for Action. And the first element which I would like to mention, I suppose that I can also try to do it by myself. Next slide, if it's not working. Q, yes. As the Director General mentioned, the energy transition, it's not only focused on the deployment of renewables. Of course, this is a very important element, but to this capacity expansion, we have to add other elements. And these other elements are driven by the variability of renewables which are deployed, solar and wind mainly, representing more than 90% of addition of capacities, by looking at how the power sector, so electricity sector, is transforming in terms of the electricity grids, but also acting on end use and driving the electrification for an efficient actually use of renewables. And of course, this transformation, which is very structural, involves other elements such as deployment of different type of policies, regulation, the planning infrastructure, has an impact on those supply chains and also end users. This combines also with the emergence of new actors, and of course one of the elements which is we see very important and emerging lately is the use of digital solutions and AI, especially for supporting complex systems with millions of assets connected. And all these elements are interconnected and with decisions in one shaping outcomes in others. So the objective is, of course, to keep the energy transition, but at the same time, it's how we do it, how cost-effectively we do it, how we decrease actually the overall cost, and we ensure the reliability. And as you can see here on this slide, so the global energy transition reached quite impressive numbers, so 2.3 trillion, more it's needed. But we look now on how actually this is also allocated to the grids, expansion, modernization, flexibility, and one of the solutions is, of course, a storage capability. If we go to the next slide, I am also pleased to mention that, so I can do it by myself. Very good, thank you. Reliable, cost-effective power system, as I mentioned, depend on the grid infrastructure, but also what we see more and more, and I think the Director General mentioned some of the assessments which we carried out. And we look, actually, we try to quantify the flexibility needs in order to have the, the assessment of what is this in terms of impact. And in terms of impact, what we can see is that we have to look, although it's a complex, maybe more complex, concept, to look at the time frames. And the time frames actually are starting from milliseconds to hours and daily actually use of these flexibility options in order to cope with disruptions, in order to cope with balancing the demand and generation, but also longer term, so I talk about weeks and seasons, in order to cope with weather conditions, which will not allow actually to supply wind and solar. And we see in certain regions, so it's not everywhere, we see in certain regions, for example, days in January where there are no solar, so there is no solar, there is no wind. And this is, for example, happen quite often in regions like Europe. So in terms of quantifications, I'm pleased to announce that actually we launched just now this report carrying out this analysis. And what you see here on the slide, it's how much it needs to increase by times more. And you can see that daily flexibility should increase actually between 2019, we took actually the reference year, 2030, 3 times more. What does it mean? If I put the, I look at the electricity demand, total electricity demand. Globally, this represents 7% of the total electricity demand. If we look to 2050, this will represent 13% of the electricity demand. So the quantities are quite, going very much upwards. What is happening actually is, despite this quite important role that flexibility is having, it was seeing less policy attention than, for example, of course, the capacity expansion, including in the grids, because it's more complex and more difficult to measure it. However, we have to, so this is a call for taking into account a kind of quantification of what is needed, and these are global numbers. It's based actually on the assessment countries, which we use also for the World Energy Transition Outlook, so G20. If we look to the solutions, what I would like to pass here as a message is that this varies across the countries and regions, because there are different generation mix, so we do not have in all the countries the same share of solar or wind, system characteristics, but also the demand. And here we can talk about the electricity demands, which are also variable. It's not only the generation side, but also the variability on the demand side. And here it's an example actually from Africa. So in general, what you have to take maybe from this slide, if you would like, is that higher share of solar tend to face greater daily flexibility needs, while countries which have more wind will experience more long duration type of flexibility. So this is one element which I would like to pass. And of course, we do not have only one solution, because this required different, services, which can be provided by different technologies. And you see there, so of course, storage in terms of batteries, and there are declining costs in the batteries. We also see demand response, so this is more on the customer side. We also see interconnections, and this should not be underestimated across all the time frames. And I would also like to go back to the long duration storage and capabilities. I will not mention all the technologies, but I think it's a portfolio of solutions which we have to put in place. So This will help actually to make the deployments more socio-economic feasible, and will actually contribute not only to optimization of the cost, but and affordability and competitiveness, but also to the security of electricity supply. So we see that actually policies and market frameworks are evolving. And we have here an assessment which was done for 26 countries with the support, of course, of UNESA. And we can see that actually half of these countries have put explicit target on storage policies. Most of them, they rely on fiscal and financial incentives which bring actually this into implementation. And of course, the focus is on battery storage to support grid operation and deployment. However, some policies go even further. They combine the required storage alongside new renewable capacity. So these two technologies are combined together, and their deployment is ensured together. So it's also the project level, not only the system level. And what I mentioned before, the long duration storage, we see that it's increasing. So first, we see the daily, which is the most relevant, but we also see the long duration storage needed. And I mentioned one region, European Union. We also see this actually taken into account in the United Kingdom and in Australia. So batteries, of course, they are there because the cost decreased by 93% over the last 10 years, so they come as a solution. Now, at COP29, 65 states and 46 non-state actors endorsed the Global Energy Storage and Grid Pledge, committing to major grid expansion in terms of kilometers, but also to storage target, which is 1.5 terawatt by 2030. The policies framework are therefore important, and this will ensure the boost towards those new developments which I mentioned before. Now, I said that there is a kind of, and we see that more and more, combination between renewable generation source together with storage capability. So solar and storage can actually ensure this more system integration. And the Coalition for Action report on solar and storage reflect this shift. Of course, there is the technology, and I mentioned that the costs were going down, but it's not only the technology, so how this is integrated into the power system by taking into account the markets, the regulatory frameworks, in order to deliver what we, the Coalition for Action and we, ourselves as well, we consider as a major three outcomes. So first of all, it was the definition of the flexibility needs, the identification of the key enablers for investments, and market access, and practical policy pillars for governments and regulators. So, in summary, IRENA Coalition for Action has 5 messages. Flexibility should be considered at political and policy level, although maybe a more difficult concept to push forward, but we support actually that through those quantifications which I mentioned before. So there is, of course, a methodology to do that. Storage, systemic planning, which is actually linking the generation, transmission, flexibility solution under one framework. and regulatory and market mechanisms to monetize, so to put in place actually the delivery of those solutions by actually activating either capabilities of storage and trigger investments in those, as well as in interconnection or demand response. Permitting and planning, this is very much discussed in order to allow transparency and environmental stewardship, as well as stakeholder engagement. And last but not least, enhanced finance and market access by combining different financing instruments and de-risking mechanisms. So I will stop here with the content part of the slides. So what I would like to mention is that we face actually a structural change going beyond the deployment of renewables, grids expansion, modernization, enhancing technologies, flexibility options, and use of digital solutions. And they are at the center of this development. Of course, there are needs on the end-use consumers in terms of electrification of various sectors. And actually, this high-level public-private dialogue matters for us, and we would like to, and we will continue to engage with you. Similarly, governments, regulators, also system operators, investors, we must work also together with you to translate this ambition into projects. And not only for that, to provide the policy framework which needs to be put in place. So IRENA, together with its member states and through the non-governmental partnership initiatives such as Coalition for Action and UNESA, remain committed to support this cooperation. And I look forward for the discussion which will follow. I thank you for your attention, and then I hand over to our moderator, Dr. Melinda Crane. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director General, for that scene setter. Also, many thanks to Director General Francesco De Camera for his words as well. And I think we've heard it in both presentations. These are big numbers that we're talking about. The kind of build-out that Norella has just described amounts to doubling annual grid spending and to scaling global storage capacity six-fold. And this has to happen now because, as we heard from Francesco, renewables are not a nice to have. They are the backbone of a resilient, renewable powered system, and building out at this kind of a scale takes time. So the good news is that our session brings together people who can make this happen, ministers, financial institutions, and industry leaders who are with us here today, all of them working to unleash capital to help turn the tripling up and doubling down pledge into reality by refurbishing and expanding grids and storage at a timely pace. So let's get started. We do have an impressive array of very high-level participants. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to do a detailed introduction round here. I will simply mention names and titles when I call on each of you to speak. We've decided to structure our discussion in 2 rounds of exchange. A first round on the challenges that you confront in practice, a second round on priorities for overcoming these, and after that, if time allows, we will go to pre-registered additional interventions from the floor. And let me just remind all of our participants that I will need to be a strict timekeeper because we started with a delay and we're definitely behind schedule. So do please keep your remarks to the allotted 2 minutes during the first round of exchange, and we're going to go for less than 90 seconds in the second round, more like 1 minute there. You are a wonderfully diverse group. Each of you operates at a different leverage point in the system. So I'd like to ask you to share your respective perspectives on the single most important constraint that you see in your own experience and what you think needs to change first. And we'll begin with the Seychelles Minister for Environment, Climate, Energy, and Natural Resources, Her Excellency Marie-May Jérémy. For the power systems of small island states such as the Seychelles, what has proven more decisive? Storage scale, grid controls, or market reform?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, Director General, distinguished colleagues, good evening. So from the perspective of a small island developing system like Seychelles, the decisive factor has not been based on one single element, but the sequencing and integration of all three. However, if I had to prioritize based on what unlocks progress most effectively, then storage scale and grid control both have proven very decisive. In small, isolated grids like ours, stability is the binding constraint. Before we can liberalize markets, the system operator has to be able to effectively manage the systems to ensure reliability. Increasing the share of variable renewable energy, such as solar, need to be actively managed in real time. So investments in battery storage, advanced grid controls, network upgrades, strengthening, and operational protocols, just to name a few, have therefore been very critical in allowing for higher penetration of solar without compromising the overall reliability. In the Seychelles, batteries are not about long duration energy shifting, but more about fast response, frequency control, and smoothing variability. Currently, the country is operating a centralized battery storage system, and we're looking to further add to this as we roll out more renewable energy plants in the coming 5 years. So on the other hand, market reform plays a supporting but essential role to the other two. In small markets like Seychelles, the reform is more about clarity, bankability, and risk allocation. So standardized PPAs, transparent tariffs, and predictable rules are crucial in order for us to attract private investment, but they only work if the physical system can ultimately absorb the power. So in short, grid controls and storage first, and then market reform alongside and reinforcing those other two. For SIDS, the transition is not just about scale, it is ultimately about control, coordination, and overall confidence in our system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And your remarks on how the solar emphasis affects your constraints in the area of storage absolutely corroborate what we heard from Norela Constantinescu a moment ago, so that's quite interesting. Next, we go to the Director of Engineering of UAE's Clean Energy Titan, Masdar, Dr. Ibrahim Al-Mansouri. And where would you say, in your experience, do current grid planning models break down when they're required to support stable 24/7 renewable supply rather than intermittent generation?
Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. Let me start by welcoming everyone here to the UAE, a place that contributes significantly to the global efforts on decarbonization, climate change mitigation, and energy transition agenda. And as we say in our dialect, welcome, which is marhaba sa' as well. So going back to your question, I think the current grid planning models were largely designed for a system where renewable energy play an intermittent supporting role alongside thermal baseload, not one where clean energy is expected to deliver baseload power supply 24/7. They typically optimize for annual energy volumes and peak capacity rather than hour-by-hour deliverability, which becomes a critical limitation for energy-intense users such as data centers and advanced industry. Storage is still often treated as a preferable balancing tool rather than a core system asset that fundamentally change how renewable before. This underestimates the role of energy storage in overcoming redundancy, smoothing variability, and ensuring firm supply when renewable output is low. Traditional planning is also siloed. Generation storage networks are modeled separately, even though delivering consistent clean energy requires them to be designed and operated as a single integrated system. The integrated approach is exactly what Masdar is demonstrating through our world's first giga-scale round-the-clock, the RTC project, the world's largest battery storage system for a power utility project, delivering up to 1 gigawatt of base load power day and night. The RTC combines 5.2 giga of PV along with 19 gigawatt hour of battery storage to deliver base load 1 giga of clean energy dispatchable power 24 hours a day, directly addressing the intermittency challenge that the conventional grid models struggle with. And just to re-emphasize that the RTC is actually providing a competitive tariff as compared to any other baseload power supply. Crucially, this is enabled by the UAE unique operating environment, which combines highly advanced grid, long-term offtake frameworks, policy clarity, and of course, an investment-friendly environment. This provides innovation at scale and is a model that can be replicated by other economies looking to embrace renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So reinforcing the fact that systemic integration, thinking systemically, is absolutely crucial to ensuring that flexibility that's needed in such a situation. It's now a pleasure to welcome Dr. Amgad Saeed. He's legal advisor to Egypt's Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy. And as I understand it, you will be speaking in Arabic, but we will have translation shortly after. So from the perspective of Egypt's power system operator, where does the grid first hit its limit under current circumstances? Is it transmission capacity, system stability and inertia, or flexibility and operating reserves? Where is that crucial pain point?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Aisman, the Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy in Egypt, who sends his greetings to all of you, and good evening. As I have to switch to speak in Arabic, but as you request, I can complete the intervention in English, no problem, as you request the issue of timing. So, in light of Egypt's ambitious plan to introduce renewable energy capacities, solar and wind, with large capacities reaching more than 20 gigawatts by 2030, in implementation of the Energy Strategy 2040, Egypt has developed a parallel plan to strengthen the national grid to accommodate renewables, as they are unstable energy sources that cause fluctuations in the electrical grid. This plan is based on several axes. First, implementing rapid projects to strengthen the electrical grid, where Egypt executed projects costing about $3 billion, adding over 8,000 kilometers of electrical lines. The 500 kV network was expanded, transformers were replaced and rehabilitated. Expansions were made to all transformer stations and the new stations were established. Second, integrating battery storage capacities into the electrical grid, whether as independent storage batteries or integrated into solar energy project, with a target to introduce approximately 9,000 megawatt of BESS, battery energy storage system, capacity by 2030. The Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy takes into consideration that storage batteries should not merely PV for storing energy and dispatching it during peak times, but more importantly, that the system operates as a grid forming system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, I was just discussing the lineup here, but as far as I know, we are going now to SSE PLC. And by the way, thank you also for speaking English to shorten our time. We very much appreciate that. SSE PLC is a UK-based multinational energy company that generates renewable energy and operates transmission networks in the UK and Ireland. And we're joined by the Director of Corporate Affairs, Glenn Barber. In mature power markets such as the UK, where does the regulatory process for transmission most consistently come up short? Is it in planning approvals, cost recovery, delivery, risk allocation? What would you say?
Thank you, Melinda, and good evening, distinguished colleagues. At SSE, we operate the transmission system in the north of Scotland, which, for anybody who's been there, you'll know it's not very sunny. We don't get much solar, but you get plenty of wind and rain. So we're responsible for connecting up these huge, rich, renewable resources that Scotland has. And it's why we've just announced a £33 billion investment programme to 2030, 80% of which is going into grids. And that has been enabled by a very strategic, anticipatory approach to investment from our regulator, which we think is an exemplar for others to follow. Combined with a clear mission from the UK government to achieve clean power by 2030, a long-term plan from our system operator, it gives transmission operators and investors that long-term line of sight to invest at scale, and has enabled us to engage very early with our supply chain partners with longer-term packages of work that then enable them to invest and build the capacity and manufacturing facilities. So we're in this great position, actually, where we've lined up the supply chain, we've got the regulatory approvals, we've been able to go to market with an equity raise to fund the plan. To answer your question, eventually, the last piece of the puzzle is therefore consenting, which is a familiar message. I'm sure many of you heard that before. Reforms are coming that should speed things up a little bit, but to date, it's been glacial, I think would be the word I would use. As an example, we recently received approval for a transmission line to the Isle of Skye. It took almost 3 years to get a decision from the point of submitting that one. And the Scottish Government has made its own commitment to turning future decisions around in 12 months, which would be very welcome, and its ability to do that could make or break whether or not the UK and Scottish governments can hit their targets. And we need to make sure that the planning departments themselves are adequately resourced to process the higher volume that they're going to get. But I do just want to stress that consulting effectively with communities is clearly very, very important. We think we've done the largest ever public consultation exercise Scotland has seen, and we've modified plans quite a bit off the back of that. But where the need for the project is clear, we need to get to decisions quicker, because a fast no is sometimes better than endless delay. And at the same time, we need political leaders to help us bring people, communities on this journey with us. And as a final aside, I bumped into an old SSE colleague actually earlier today who was recalling that some 15 years ago he was asked to try and help win over the public for a very controversial then transmission line that we were trying to build. This thing was toxic in terms of the heat that it got, the scrutiny. It was going to kill tourism in Scotland. It was the worst thing ever. But now, long after completion, it's never talked about. It's not an issue anymore. And in fact, one of Scotland's most visited tourist attractions is a visitor centre that we built at a hydro dam that we run, which back in the 1940s was also opposed quite vehemently by the public. So it's a way of saying we need to take the long-term view, and we need to be brave with these things to get them consented.
Thank you very much for that time perspective and how things fall into place. We stay with the private sector and go to Kang Chao Wang, who is Senior Director of Policy Research and Public Affairs at the internationally active battery innovator Contemporary Amperex Technology Company Limited, which is fondly known as CATO by its acronym. What is the most misunderstood risk, in your view, around grid-scale battery storage that still slows down regulatory approval, apropos delays in approval?
So thank you, moderator, for your question. So I'm from CATL, which is the top manufacturer of advanced batteries and system-level solutions provider, as you know, in both EV batteries as well as energy storage system. And from my perspective, the energy storage industry has entered large-scale deployment phase already, and the cost of solar plus storage has gone down drastically. According to our IRENA Coalition's report launched last year, the cost of solar plus storage has already overtaken fossil fuels to become the most economical energy solutions already. So this is a great success for renewables. And I think that the current policy barriers and hurdles of the conventional use of energy storage has mostly been addressed or on track to be solved, or at least called to attention from our policymakers. But I want to bring to attention to the new and emerging scenarios of energy storage that includes zero carbon industrial parks, vehicle to grid, as well as electric vessels. I see that there's more and more sectoral coupling between energy sector and AI and energy sector and transportation. And we see there's a lag behind of joint planning, and also in terms of pricing mechanisms, for example, in bidirectional charging is still lagging behind. And we CATL, we have already ventured into those new application scenarios and providing solutions for our global clients. In terms of zero carbon industrial parks, we have launched one in China and last year, which runs on 100% of green power direct supply. And that's essentially a microgrid system that consists of energy storage, rooftop solar, offshore wind, and bioenergy to help those heavy energy consuming manufacturing plants to decarbonize. That's the idea. And also on the vehicle to grid side, we have already put forward some pilot projects across China to test, battery warranty and battery inspection and battery insurance in the context of vehicle to grid, as well as new business model like battery rentals and battery banking. And in terms of electric vessels, this is quite new and attract many attentions, and the field is emerging. And we CATL, we have been put forward this vessel Shore Cloud integrated system to that exactly an example of the integrated solutions between energy and AI. And we have already delivered 900 electric vessels, mostly in China, but we are about to deliver the full package of power battery system solutions for our overseas client this year. It actually will be installed on an electric vessel that will be running in Vietnam and providing inland shipping services for our clients, actually a factory and a warehouse built inland. So those are some of the emerging fields and areas that I think that needs more attention, especially policy measures, supportive policy measures should follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go now to the CEO of the Global Renewables Alliance, Bruce Douglas, and ask you to give us a bit of a reality check. Do you see instances where you have the feeling that industry is overpromising relative to what grids and storage capacity can realistically absorb? And if so, where and in what context?
Thank you, moderator, and Irina for the invitation. Maybe a question back to Irina and the room. Is it industry overpromising, or is it, as Narelli pointed out in her introductory presentation, governments, regulatory authorities and policy frameworks which are under-delivering on grids and storage? I'll leave that out there. We as the industry are heavily incentivized to bring on flexibility, grids and storage. And I'll give you one example. Northeast Brazil, the wind and solar projects operating there are now curtailed on average 25%. Very few of our members are making money in Brazil from renewables right now. So there's a huge economic incentive. On the economics, this clearly, as pointed out by UNESA and the Director General, is an enormous economic opportunity. To reach the doubling of annual investments indicated in the COP29 pledge, it needs to be $700 billion per year, every year, between now and 2030. Just to finish with 4 solutions, if I may. Firstly, it's been touched on long-term system planning, supply, transmission, distribution, and load. When governments start asking the question of what, where, how much, and when, those are great questions across those different sectors. Secondly, on hybrid projects, so governments can incentivize and even mandate wind, solar, and storage projects at the same time. The grids, as rightly pointed out by Glenn, need to start 5 years before renewables. Anticipatory investments are critical. And on financing, I'll give a shout out to my colleague Marcus Stewart, who's sitting behind me from the Green Grids Initiative, which GRA is part of. Have a look at their financing principles, which give clear guidance as to how public and private finance can mobilize grids, especially. Last 2 points. One is on hourly matching. Huge congratulations to Masdar for your incredible 24/7 solar and storage project. That is the model for the future. The just introduced carbon border adjustment mechanism in the EU, love it or hate it, within their PPA regulation is hourly matching, which incentivizes flexibility, long duration energy storage, which is no longer niche. It is an essential to unlock clean energy value. And of course, batteries, which are now 1/3 of the price of where they were 2 years ago. And finally, not to forget demand response. My brother lives in Australia. They've just introduced free electricity for 3 hours over midday when there's excess solar. So he's now charging his electric vehicle for free for 3 hours over midday. I'm not saying it can be done everywhere, but that drives demand response and flexibility. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that clear list. I'll stay with the reality check and go to the Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General on Climate Action and the Just Transition, Mr. Selwyn Hart. Governments not infrequently frame grids and storage as purely technical infrastructure. What critical political risk would you say they overlook in doing so?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think our colleagues, Francesco and our colleagues from IRENA, they've highlighted some of the challenges. There are these massive investments going in on the, can you hear me? Or, yeah, massive investments going in to deployment. But the reality is investments in grids are not keeping pace. And as colleagues have said around the table, this is a massive challenge globally. But I really want to focus on the situation in developing and emerging economies outside of China. The reality is that when one looks at clean energy investments globally, since the adoption of the Paris Agreement about a decade ago, there's been a large concentration in the advanced economies and China. You know, I'm not worried about the UK and I'm not worried about Australia, but 150 countries representing half of the global population is attracting just 10% of clean energy investments globally. And really, the ground zero for this injustice is Africa. 60% of the world's solar potential, 30% of the clean energy transition minerals, and just 2% of global investments. So while I agree that we need to rebalance investments in grids and storage globally, there has to be a concerted global effort to address this overconcentration issue and support developing and emerging economies outside of China, was doing well. And this is not a criticism of my Chinese colleagues and friends, but we really need to focus on where capital is not fluid. And there needs, as many of you have said, there needs to be integrated systems planning. My brother from Masdar clearly states that the energy systems of today were designed for the 20th century. We need, and developing and emerging economies have a fantastic opportunity to leapfrog, given that most of the infrastructure that now needs to be built in these countries, it needs to be 21st century infrastructure. So planning, a focus on planning and the work of IRENA with Brazil and many others, this focus on planning, integrated systems planning will be absolutely critical. And the issue of finance. Now, we know that the high cost of capital, it's been well diagnosed, the cost of capital for clean energy investments, and grids are even worse than for deployment technologies. That the high cost of capital, it is the biggest barrier that developing and emerging economies face. And we really need the providers of public concessional finance really to sit around the table. And that includes the climate funds, bilateral partners, the MDBs, philanthropic capital, to sit around the table and deploy the cheap concessional risk-bearing capital that is needed to bring on board the private finance. So international collaboration and cooperation will be absolutely key. We at the UN, we are a political body, but you can be assured that we will support this effort.
Thank you very much for underlining that glaring disparity in financing conditions, which in fact is a topic we've addressed very often here at IRENA, and indeed it does involve political risk premia that are very much contradictory to the fact that the countries in question have some of the most abundant renewable resources in the world. So thank you for reminding us of that and for your other comments. We go now to Alfonso Rodriguez, who is president of the Association for the Promotion of Renewable Energy in the Dominican Republic. And I'd like to start shifting our focus now toward a deeper dive on solutions to some of the constraints and risks that we've been talking about. And in the Dominican Republic, the government is making an effort to bolster tax and other financial incentives for promoting investment and scaling renewable energy. What reforms or mechanisms is your association advocating to mobilize grid and storage investment, and how will these affect bankability and deployment timelines?
Thank you. Well, first, what we clearly understood in the association is that we need to reduce risk. And basically, we have today to anticipate the bottlenecks that we are seeing in transmission and distribution, and have a proper planning so that we can think not at a project by project level, but at a systemic level, so that we can have the investment that is required at transmission and distribution. We have to remunerate the flexibility properly. Storage demand response and hybrid solutions are essential for infrastructure. They are not an optional add-on anymore. And markets and regulations must clearly value flexibility, services, capacity ramping, congestion relief, and resilience, so projects can be financed at scale. This is key, particularly in the Caribbean region. This regulatory certainty will allow an easier bankability. Permits, dispatch rules, and interconnection criteria must be transparent, stable, and time-bound, so investors can manage risk, but they cannot finance ambiguity. So, most important is stop thinking from a project by project level, but better at the system level for planning and financing. Clear bankable remuneration for storage and flexibility, and risk mitigation and blended finance instruments available so that we can reduce project cost and be more competitive. At the end, this will reduce regulatory and revenue uncertainty, lowering the cost of capital and allowing projects to reach financial close faster. When grid and storage investments are the risk through clear rules and smart finance, at SOFER we see that capital flows quickly and the energy transition accelerates. That is the shift that SOFER is working to make happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go to Austria now. With us is the Director General for Energy at the Federal Ministry of Economy, Energy and Tourism, Dr. Benedikt Enza. As we've heard from a number of speakers and also from the Deputy Director General in her scene setter, flexibility is clearly a crucial system capability that does require a portfolio of solutions. So let me ask you how flexibility targets can and should be incorporated into national energy planning while still preserving efficient market signals.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to share with you the Austrian experience on flexibility and on flexibility targets. As we all know, and I think there's no need to stress around the table, flexibility is key to integrating renewables. So the first point is about hardware and deploying storage, deploying grid. It's quite clear that we need more storage capacity, that we need adequate grid connection in order to integrate renewables. We need to deploy more equipment to enable demand response and flexible demand. And the solution here, I believe, as has been mentioned several times, certainly is planning. And it goes further than that. In Austria, we have, for instance, integrated storage as a requirement into our national support schemes for PV, solar PV, which resulted in a lot of storage that we now have in households and businesses. Now, the question is, have we increased system flexibility? And the honest answer is very little, if at all. And this leads me to the second point, which is we need to think more carefully about how we actually run storage and how we run grids. It's not enough to have the hardware, we need the software as well. And the software part is actually where we need to find a market design that allows exactly market signal, price signals to work effectively. So what did we do in Austria? We tried and worked for almost 4 years to find a concept that enshrines this idea into a legal requirement or a legal basis. And 3 weeks ago, we adopted a new legal framework in Austria which incorporates the notion of system friendliness. This is how we like to call it now. What is system friendliness? It's basically the idea if a renewable generation facility will feed in at a given point in time, it will receive benefits in terms of network charges, for instance. If it is located at a point where it would usually reduce congestion, then it will receive benefits in terms of network charges. So while I think it's very important to have flexibility targets that help us deploy more hardware, we need to think much more in terms of how we operate those hardware bits. And we, in Austria, we are happy to share any lessons learned and experience from our concept of system friendliness, which we are starting to implement this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for your frankness in regard to how much flexibility you've actually managed to achieve and for your emphasis on the importance of the software factor. Let's go now to the State Grid Corporation of China. Shan Baoguo is Vice President of State Grid's Energy Research Institute. And based on large-scale deployment experience, what grid-related measure would you say has delivered the greatest system-wide benefit to power systems that are integrating a very high share of renewables?
Thank you, Korea. Let me introduce the development of energy storage in China. Along with the development of variable renewable energy in China, the capacity of energy storage have grown significantly with steadily improving utilization. By the end of September 2025, the installed capacity of energy storage in China reached 103 gigawatts, with an increase of over 30 times compared to 2020. Accounting for more than 40% of the world's total. During the 3 quarters of 2025, the average utilization hours of China energy storage resources achieved nearly 770 hours, up by 120 hours than the same time of last year. As an important kind of flexibility resource, the energy storage plays a crucial role in ensuring energy supply security, facilitating renewable energy utilization, and maintaining the power system stability. In 2024, the annual average utilization hours in some areas, such as Xinjiang and Taipei province, had already exceeded 1,000 hours. During the summer peak period in 2025, the energy storage in the SGCC operation area provides 64 gigawatt flexibility capacity, which equal to the capacity of nearly 3 times Three Gorges hydro power station. During the summer evening peak, the energy storage delivered an average discharge duration of 2.4 hours, making a significant contribution to release the evening peak supply pressures. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you. And now for our final comment in this first round of discussion, we go to Spain. And Victor Marcos is Director General for Energy Planning and Coordination in the Ministry for Ecological Transition and the Demographic Challenge. What planning reform would you say has had the fastest real-world impact on grid and storage deployment in your country?
Thank you. Not an easy question. I would say, talking about public policies, the fastest change would be that we've changed our grid planning from a static point of view to a dynamic one, which does not mean that we are updating our electricity grid planning every year or every 6 months, but in the past we used to update it every 6 years, and now the last period until 2025, we made an update in 2024, and now we are making a new planning towards 2030. So we are trying to get as much as we can from the planning, and we think this is a way we can go through in other ways. But there's another thing, and you talk about real world, that I'd like to mention. In 2022, there was a energy price crisis, and it was, we saw in Spain a real growth of self-consumption and storage behind the meter just because of this energy crisis. Of course, we had also grants for the installation, but they used to be also enforced in the past, but they weren't as successful as they were in that year. So sometimes public policy, but sometimes we have to go along with the reality.
Thank you very much. We're going to move now to our second round, and I'll just say in advance that we are really tight on time. We are quite behind schedule. We have about 21, 22 minutes that we can go into overtime here, and I just did the math, and it looks to me like we can take a maximum of 1 minute per person in this lightning second round, and then we will still manage to get in the pre-registered open interventions that I have on my list. But again, those are going to be very, very short. So here's what I suggest for our lightning round. We've talked about some solutions. I'd like to delve deeper now, and I'd like to ask all of you to talk about how we resolve those constraints and risks and what you see as the most immediate high-impact change required to accelerate infrastructure development to match pace with the much-needed growth of renewable generation and demand. So the one transformative change that you would prioritize above everything else. And I will start with Seychelles.
Okay, so in our case, Seychelles, I think the main priority, or that we would prioritize at the moment, is sort of the mismatch or a silo mentality in terms of the development in this space. So most often we see the renewable energy developing faster than the infrastructure that must support them. So for us in the Seychelles, I'd say we need a more holistic, integrated and coordinated approach. Really looking at streamlined planning, permitting and regulation. And this will allow for limited financing and other limited resources like land to be used more strategically while creating the right environment that will allow for investor confidence and the sector to become more ready. And so this integrated and coordinated approach is one which my ministry is currently working on so that the country can meet its energy targets, an energy sector which is more secure, resilient, and clean.
Can you say in half a sentence what the lever is that you will use to get that systemic, integrated, policy coherent approach?
Okay, so it's going to take a lot of commitment, obviously, from the side of government to put in place the facilitation, but really building onto the partnerships to bridge some of the capacity constraints that limits us from being this coordinated vehicle as we take on the energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go to Masdar now.
From renewable energy developer perspective, the single most immediate high-impact change is faster, more coordinated grid reforms, so that networks, connection, and system planning move in step with the growth of renewable energy generation and electricity demand, of course. In many markets today, the ambition is there, the capital is there, the technology is ready, but projects are being held back by long connection queues, slow network upgrades, and planning models that were designed for a very different energy system. As a result, we have renewables that are ready to build, but no clear or timely pathway to connect them. By accelerating grid expansion and simplifying interconnection processes, governments could unlock a significant volume of projects that are ready, permitted, financed, and ready to build. At the same time, treating storage as a core infrastructure rather than as an add-on would allow renewable to deliver more reliable, firm power and reduce pressure on networks. Aligning permitting and approvals more closely with the grid planning would remove duplication, reduce uncertainty, and shorten delivery timelines across the system. With a clearer grid signals, predictable timelines, and a stable framework, capital can move earlier and greater scale, allowing infrastructure development to match the pace of renewable growth, and raising demand from electrification, AI, and heavy industry. When infrastructure developers have certainty on a process as well as outcome, capital can move at the speed required. From Masdar experience across mature and emerging markets, progress accelerates fastest when policy clarity, permitting reform, and bankable investment framework move together. Where governments provide predictable pathways and technology-neutral standards, the private sector can scale delivery rapidly and at lower cost.
Thank you. Just a half sentence more from you as well, if you don't mind. We're hearing a lot more governments and regional organizations like the EU now talking the talk about simplification, faster permitting, and so on. Are you seeing an increasing tendency to walk the talk?
Unfortunately, it is not the case. I think we could see more talks, but less actions. And this is where I think initiatives and reforms like that is really necessary in order to ensure that we walk the talks.
Thank you. Egypt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think now there is no problem in Egypt regarding permits and license, as flexible laws and rules have been established to make all procedures available smoothly and easily, such as the investment law, renewable energy law, and the electricity law. But I think if we, from my point of view, if we answer the following question, we can solve the problems. First, how can secure the required finance for the grid operators as a public sector? Second, how can we improve the finance condition for Africa region? And how can we solve the issue of supply chain for electrical transformers, where manufacturers worldwide face increasing demand? Also, we have to develop innovation of financing mechanisms as a green bonds, blended finance, climate funds, strengthening international cooperation in technology transfer, capacity building, and financing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Katul?
Yes, I think the ARENA Coalition's report launched last year has provided a good answer to this question. So policy, standards, and investment is the tripartite solution that needs to be going hand in hand in order to accelerate the deployment of energy storage. And on policies, I think countries need to integrate the factor of energy storage into their energy planning on national level. And they need to have national level installation targets to best drive investment into this field, because there's not enough investment. And to reply my friend from UN, yes, countries are different in terms of grid infrastructure, in terms of power market development, and also environment and climate factors. For example, humidity and temperature, that requires tailored energy storage solutions. So that's why I think that pilot projects are needed to be put forward by countries in order to encourage best practices. So that's policy. And standards, I think there's more and more international coordination and mutual recognition that are needed, because we have standards on paper, but we need to have those standards to be translated into action. And also on investment, I think financing mechanisms and also insurance policies needs to be introduced. And insurance companies can work with top manufacturers to co-design insurance products that are designed to energy storage that cover the whole life cycle risks in order to lower the risks for our investors and also encourage a faster adoption of energy storage technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just remind everybody, possibly one priority, if you don't mind, so that we do get it in 1 minute. Thank you very much. SSE, you're next.
Let me see if I can do better than a minute. For us, it's easy. It's planning. I already said that. But as my colleague at the UN rightly points out, we're not the problem in the UK. The problem is the developing part of the world. And as Bruce has already alluded to, I think that the single easiest, quickest thing that would make a big difference is for more countries, MDBs, to sign up to the climate finance principles that our friends at the GGI, supported by UNISA, which we co-chair, launched earlier this year. Because at the moment we have this absurdity of us all sitting here talking about grids being the key enabler of the green transition, but a taxonomy that doesn't classify them as green. Let's fix that.
Thank you very much. And we go next to Bruce, Global Renewables Alliance. Hopefully that wasn't your point that you were going to make.
It was, but it allows me to say something else. So the GGI financing principles, just to repeat, but the fastest and lowest cost way to increase investor confidence and accelerate the deployment of grids and storage at the scale we need is to streamline and accelerate permitting. But it's walking the talk, moderator, as you said. It's about implementation. If you look at the European Commission, fantastic permitting rules. Only a couple of member states out of 27 have so far implemented them. Those that have seen dramatic increase in wind and solar deployment. The same could be true for grids especially, and of course storage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And over now to the Special Advisor to the UN, SG, Selwyn Hart.
My recommendation would be around consolidation and cooperation. We really need to consolidate many of the existing efforts at the international level. I agree, it's local, but you have a situation, or you have situations where developing and emerging economies, are being approached by the EU, by the UK, by the MDBs. There needs to be collaboration and coordination to deliver at the scale and impact that we needed. And within the UN, as I said in the session before, we're getting our house in order because we're sometimes at fault. Too many UN system entities are approaching countries with these great plans. And at COP30, the Secretary General, he directed UNDP to build on the architecture of the climate promise that supported over 100 countries to prepare their NDC, to use that architecture now to switch to implementation mode. So consolidation, cooperation, and really working in individual countries, recognizing their diversity. I agree with you 100%, but there needs to be consolidation at the international level.
Thank you very much. We go now to the Renewables Association of the Dominican Republic, ASOFA.
Well, from ASOFA, we consider that it's key having regulatory certainty so that we can adapt this new reality that the energy sector is totally disrupted, and we can adapt with more flexibility the differences between the generation and the demand.
Thank you also for that very economic answer. Austria.
Thank you very much. I was going to say speed up and streamline permitting procedures, but this has already been mentioned by our colleagues from UK, so I'd offer a second alternative, which is all measures to use the existing grid more efficiently. In gas, already a decade ago, we have invented measures to free up capacity which is unused, like use it or lose it. We have developed surrender of capacity. Why can't we use it for electricity as well to make use of our existing grid in a more efficient way?
Thank you. Now we go to State Grid Corporation of China.
I think there are 4 measures important. To promote the high-quality development of energy storage, it's necessary to strengthen the guidance of planning and construction, optimize the scientific dispatching and utilization, expand diversified market and compensation benefits, and accelerate the innovative implementation of diversified technical routes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Spain?
Yeah, I think everything's been said. On my side, I would stress the point. This is streamlined by trying to differentiate between the, like we call zombie projects and real ones, and these take advantage of the existing grid, but we are trying to get as much as we can, because in fact we believe that we face a rather an administrative constraint rather than a real technical one.
Thank you very much. Also to all of you for keeping your remarks so very concise. That's been very helpful indeed. We do now have about 5 minutes for 5 floor interventions. So again, I'm going to ask those who have pre-registered their comments for interventions to please be very, very disciplined with your time. And what we asked you to do in the guidance beforehand was to share one practical reform, investment tool, or coordination mechanism that could be implemented within the next 2 years. So again, we're looking for a priority measure that can be implemented short term. And I will begin with Japan, the Director of International Affairs at the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, Yoshiomo Yoshino. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to make a comment. Regarding today's agenda, we agree that the power system should be considered holistically as a generation, transmission, and demand are interconnected and mutually dependent. So, on the other hand, power systems are influenced by regional factors such as market structures, system scale, demand patterns, renewable energy potential, transmission configuration. So there is no single solution. Each country often considers countermeasures based on its own circumstances. In doing so, it may not be possible to objectively understand the rationale behind other countries' institutional framework. So IRENA is expected to serve as a platform for sharing national initiatives by collecting real market data and disseminating analysis and recommendation on that data. So we believe sharing such insight will accelerate implementation, grid stretch, and demand side measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So sharing best practices as a measure that can also speed up the kind of reforms that we've been discussing. Africa 50 is Pan-African infrastructure investor and asset manager, and the managing director of project development is with us here, Mr. Demba Diallo. You have the floor. Your top priority.
Thank you. So as you say, Africa 50, we are an investor owned by 33 African countries, 2 central banks, African Development Bank, and PIC. So we invest in infra, and energy is an important sector. We are doing project development and also late-stage investment in generation and also in transmission. We signed in December in Kenya the first independent power transmission in Africa, so we have to bring private investment into the grid. But to do so, we have a constraint, which is all the contracts that are signed need the government to issue sovereign guarantee, directly or indirectly. So this is a constraint. And this is contingent liabilities. So the only way to scale and to accelerate for us is to lower the cost of capital by creating a facility that will be able to do this payment guarantee in lieu of the government. And this can be done using asset recycling. Asset recycling, which is a mean we are using to unlock the capital which is in asset generating cash owned by government. We can use this proceed and invest alongside entities like IFC, World Bank, MDBs, and other international financial institutions to provide this type of payment guarantee so that we can accelerate the investment into the grid or generation without relying on sovereign guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We go now to Huawei, Chief Representative for Industrial Development for Huawei in the Middle East region, Mr. Dong Feng. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm from Huawei. As a private sector, we propose two changes: global collaboration and the local adoptions. Firstly, we need to accelerate the grid forming standard at the international levels. Not only the technical standard, but also the global framework, particularly on the performance timelines, such kind of things. So we believe IRENA can play a key role. As a neutral platform, we can push the global alignment on the timeline and the key requirement. Secondly, we suggest that the government to adopt this standard into the grid code at the national level. So it will encourage the industry to deploy the storage at the large scales and maximize the value of the existing infrastructures. So therefore, we propose these two actions at the near terms: grid forming a standard and the grid code adoption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is from Germany's development cooperation partner, the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ, and he's head of infrastructure, energy, water, mobility. Stefan Marke, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. And I also can make it very short because I don't want to add something new. I just want to underline that also from our perspective, integrated grid storage and renewable planning is key. And the second is standardized fast-track permitting for typical grid and storage investments. And that's it. And let's do it. I think political will is key, and technical solutions for these issues are there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Last comment in this section comes from the gentleman to my left, who is also the rapporteur for this session, and he is from the International Solar Energy Society, former ISES president and current board member, Dave Linné.
Yes,
Dave.
thank you very much. And this is on behalf of the coalition working groups towards 100% renewable energy co-chairs, Rainer Hendrik Ralvers of the European Renewable Energy Federation, and myself. The most important issue that we think is, that we've been discussing today is obvious to me. System flexibility is key to the energy transition. This implies smart, decentralized production, consumption, and grids. Large and flexible baseload power plants such as coal and nuclear will no longer be compatible to a resilient energy system, even if these plants can be ramped up and down in a certain event. So policies, legislation, and regulations must address, prioritize, and accelerate flexibility. Energy market designs, including taxes, tariffs, grid fees, and other mechanisms are instrumental in achieving flexibility and will make flexibility measures financially attractive and inflexibility conditions no longer a viable business case. And as these inflexible systems are phased out, solar plus storage becomes a key enabler to achieving full system flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And not only have you made that contribution, you will also be collating the reports for this entire session and presenting those, I believe, on the final day of the assembly. So thank you very much for wearing two hats in this session. I will now attempt the very briefest of summaries, and this is very much based on the very active listening that's being done by the organizers of this session, here, Elena and Jared both. So many thanks to both of you, and I'm just, so to speak, the vehicle here for these conclusions. But basically, 4 key points that I think we've heard really from many of you. Starting out, of course, with the Director General and the Deputy Director General's opening remarks. Grid readiness is going to determine the speed and success of renewable deployment. High penetration will only be achieved if grids are strengthened. Transmission upgrades, modern operating protocols, grid forming capabilities, they are prerequisites. They are not nice to haves. Weak grids will cap renewables potential. It's as simple as that. Second key point, energy storage is strategic infrastructure. Storage is moving decisively from being a balancing tool to a critical asset. I think we've heard that again and again today. And fast response, grid forming behavior, long duration capability, and demand response, all of those add up to an energy storage system that we can count on for reliability, that we can count on for 24/7 clean power and industrial decarbonization. Third key point, policy clarity. We've heard it again and again and again. And unlocking finance at scale and with true international equity in the finance. So clear long-term policy signals are absolutely crucial. System-based planning, aligning incentives, also essential. And with coordinated regulation, policy guidance according to country specific needs, and concessional finance for emerging economies, including things like sovereign guarantees and early integration of storage and grids in national planning schemes. All of that will help deliver so that countries can realize their ambitions and shape their energy transitions at speed. So basically, bottom line is the central issue is no longer technology or cost, it's governance, it's sequencing, it's system-level discipline. And we must move to address these challenges. If we don't, we will perhaps continue to see deployment, but not at the scale and not at the speed that we need, and system performance and system reliability and credibility will deteriorate. So that key challenge is very much going to be on IRENA's agenda going forward. It's going to be on the agenda of the Coalition for Action and all of the various other partnership initiatives that are involved in this topic area, whether it's UNISA or others. And we thank you very much for giving us the material now to take this forward and work on. So let's give a warm round of applause, first of all, to all of our speakers today. Secondly, to the IRENA team for the very hard work they've done to put together this session. And lastly, I thank all of you in the audience for your attention and for your time, because it has been a long afternoon. And I would finally like to just remind everybody that we have other sessions now once the assembly formally gets underway tomorrow that will be picking up on some of the topics we've been talking about, including the high-level dialogue on accelerating electrification pathways for renewables, grids, and industry. And that also will be looking at, we will also be looking at green industrialization. Finally, all panelists who are still with us, come up here, please, because we want to do a family photo before you leave. So I wish everybody a great evening. Thank you so much. Goodbye.